Hello, everyone, and welcome to Around the World with Duff. I am Duff, and I'm going around the world. For those of you just joining, thank you so much. And for those of you who've come back for the broadcast, I really appreciate you supporting and your comments. Oh, my hair is all funky there. Yeah. Oh, wow. This show is about me going or talking to different people in different communities around the globe, finding out how their daily life is operating, their opinions on certain issues. There's a lot of issues happening right now. And I just like to know what people are thinking on the ground without any media spin or anything, happening in that regard. So I think it's been quite a journey, an eye-opening journey for me, talking to different people in different countries and finding out when lockdowns happen and that sort of jazz. So and it's also important to arm ourselves with this information and a global mind, if that is possible. So also, this show happens on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, usually at 1 o'clock. I'm trying for 1 o'clock. It's easier now that I've moved out of the global sort of area into just North America. It's a lot easier to schedule people, but still tricky. Some people, it depends on the subject matter. And today's subject matter is quite sensitive, I guess. And it was hard to find people that were willing to discuss the subject, which is today is about race relations, which is also interwoven with COVID. And we think it's two separate things, but it's not. It actually is all one issue. And I really want to welcome my guests today that are here on the show. I really appreciate them coming on and giving their view on things. So as I said, today's topic is race relations. I actually was going to cancel today's episode because I was very concerned that as a white person, what right do I have to talk about it? And actually, I start to tear up when I think about it. But in viewing my friend's video live stream that was happening in Los Angeles, as she was deciding whether or not to go out into the streets of Los Angeles and support her people or stay at home. And she said a very important thing, and I overheard, and that was, "We need your voice. White people, we need your voice out there." And that something tweaked in my brain, and I thought about my journey, and it actually is my duty to speak up and my duty to rally people together and talk about this subject. So that was something that I've been sorry, got a hairball. I've been contemplating over the past few days. And hey, there's my cousin Diane, who's in Windsor, Chatham area. Actually, we had a good talk about the Underground Railroad last night, her and I. Just some light topics. And LK, who's hockey nut. And Grace, thanks for joining, you guys. Anyway, so I thought, okay, so what's been my journey? What right do I have? Well, actually, I have had quite a journey in terms of culturally, in terms of this subject, in terms of race. And I'm from Saskatchewan. I grew up in a community of about 800 people in the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan. God, sorry, folks. It's very dry here in Toronto today. So I grew up in a very white community. I think there might have been about 5 or 6 churches in my little town, 5 or 6 churches. And that is saying something in such a small community. And so that also is an issue as well, right? I then moved on to North Dakota, which was also a very white place. I went to college there. I studied opera, and then I moved over into Vancouver. But I have to say, while I was in Saskatchewan, first of all, as a teenager, for some reason, a man named Jester Harrison came through our hometown and held an intensive, a choral intensive. I was very big into choral work and singing in the chorus and stuff. And harmonies and that type of thing. And he came through and he was doing a week intensive on slavery songs and gospel music. And for some reason, I love gospel music. It's in my blood. I, at a young age, was very passionate about this. And I will never forget him talking. And this is a man who, at that time, this was in the mid 80s, I guess, or early 80s, was already in his 70s, I guess. He's very well known in the community. He wrote the song Amen, 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 which is an old gospel hymn. And he also worked with Boney M on some of the early, he had quite a few stories, but he also had a lot of slavery stories, and we actually sang a few of the slavery songs. That was as a young kid, that was my first introduction to, first of all, I had never seen a Black person in person, which is unbelievable to me, knowing who I am today. So that kind of propelled me into living in Vancouver, which was also an interesting experience. I remember meeting people like Dennis Simpson and Laveen Eli. These are local people who were heavy into the theater community, and I'm sitting through some of their gospel concerts. And then I joined a gospel choir, which joined up with the Seattle Total Experience Gospel Choir. And that was a life-changing experience as well, experiencing the Baptist Church in Seattle. We went down there. So over time, this has been like sort of a huge thing in my life. Then I've actually traveled on cruise ships and visiting different countries in Africa. I've traveled through to Africa. I was in the South Pacific. So my mind slowly started to expand and open up and become more educated on people's lives. And so recently, over the past couple of years, I also did some theater here in Toronto, a show called Maurice Carter's Innocence, where it was also about a Black man in the States, Maurice Carter, who befriended a white man. They became best friends, and Maurice Carter was accused of a crime he didn't commit. And this white man was his voice and actually worked very hard to get him released from the charges. So he was in jail for years for a crime that he didn't commit. But this white man actually made it his mission to have Maurice released from jail. And then most recently, I did a show called Dandelions in the Wind, which I worked with Quisha. We'll talk more about that, which was about an interracial couple marrying and then the sort of demise and of their relationship and what happened with that. And I think that was in the, Quisha will talk more about it, but I think that was happening in the 60s, late 60s. So yes. So my point is that educating our children and educating the people around us is the most important thing we can do, including the police and people in power. That's what everyone should be doing right now, educating each other, whether you're white, brown, and also the Aboriginal community and First Nations of Canada. People need to also educate themselves about the history. There's a lot of statues being torn down right now. We need to know why. Who were those people? We need to let our children know who those people were. Anyway, so that's my big sort of talk on why I'm doing this and why my sort of impetus behind it as a white person. So every time I do the show, I like to do a little COVID update. I also like to visit the country of Lesotho in South Africa, because let's just look at Lesotho. Let's just look at that for a bit. That makes my shoulders just go down. Lesotho has 4 cases, and 0 deaths. So they are a landlocked country. They have remained at 0 deaths, and so I just like to visit Lesotho every time I do the show. The global counts have rapidly risen because I just checked them yesterday, and I actually had to. Well, there's Marie. Hi, Marie. I had to update my chart. I love this map. So the total global cases jumped 100,000 just in one day. Whew. So it's at 7,415,319. And deaths jumped again. I think about 100,000 in a day. So that's at 417,546. And then in the States, it's 113 and 38 deaths. The U.S. has today again jumped to 2 million. I'm sure you heard it on the news. It's officially hit 2 million plus. And then, I mean, the death rate is still quite low compared to 2 million. It's 113,000, but still that's 113,000 lost souls that weren't lost before. The top 10 countries for fatalities are the USA, UK is second, Brazil is third, Italy, France, Spain, Mexico, Belgium, Germany, Iran, and Canada is the 10th. So we're still not out of the woods if we are in the top 10. Canada has 96,653 cases, recovered, which is pretty good, 55,571, and 7,000 plus deaths, almost 8,000. So my guests actually are a couple of people are in the States, and Quisha is in Canada. Hold on, let me just get rid of this map. So I wanted to just look at the cases in Dallas, which is where Adrian is. So that's 12,945 cases and 274 deaths. Houston, though, which, and I'm going to ask Adrian about this, is quite intriguing to me. Houston only has 153 cases and 0 deaths. So I know I have friends in Houston who are there, and they've opened up quite a bit there. They're out at bars and socializing. So I find that quite interesting. But then also in Texas, Walker, Texas, which is not far, 1,854 cases and 27 deaths. So that's considerably different from the rest of Texas. Also intriguing. Laveen, Chicago, where Laveen is, and Cook, I think that's actually, and I'll ask him if Cook is actually center of Chicago. Is it Laveen? Yes, I think so. 83,585 cases. So 83,000 plus cases in Chicago and 4,000 deaths. So that's horrible. And we're still rising. We're making masks mandatory on the subway here in Toronto. So I find that that's a sign, right? It's still, people still it's not done yet. And we're going to talk more about that. But before I leave my guests waiting out in the cold too long, I'm going to bring in all my guests. So I've got Laveen here. Hello, Laveen.
Hello.
And then Adrian. Hi, Adrian.
Hi there.
And Quisha. Quisha, your mic is muted, I guess. So here, I'll unmute it for you.
I muted it. Hello.
Hi. How's everybody doing today? Today,
right. Better today.
Yep, they good.
Yeah. It's been thank you so much for coming on, you guys. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this and talk about such sensitive topics. It's not easy for any of us to do it, but I think what's important is that we do it. We need to talk and keep talking, right? Quisha, you are in Toronto, is that right?
Yes. Stouffville, yes. Toronto.
Yes, yeah. Stouffville, right? And Laveen's you are in Chicago?
I'm in the suburbs. I'm actually in DuPage County, but I'm very, very near Cook.
Oh, okay. And Adrian, you are in?
I'm in Dallas City proper, right in the middle of the city.
Oh, you are? Wow, great. So I wanted to, as you know, I wanted to talk about the current state of things. Quisha, I know that you're very heavily into the whole scene, right? We did a show together called Dandelions in the Wind, and I know that actually was quite a large topic to handle.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us, first of all, a little bit about who you are, and for people that don't know?
Certainly. First, I am a mother. I have a couple of production companies related to live music, and also with KJ Group related to Dandelions in the Wind, the musical we did. And I am a vocalist in the city, do a lot of session work. Recently was the backup singer for Johnny Reid, Canadian artist, across Canada tour. So that's a bit about me.
Yeah. And have you always lived in Toronto, Quisha?
Yes, I was born and raised here.
And your family, were they born in Toronto too?
No, my mom and dad come from Jamaica. Yeah. And
if they're watching,
Jamaica, and I'm the first generation Canadian.
Oh, great. And so going back to Dandelions, can you just tell people a little bit about that journey for you? I know you directed us in the show. We were in the show, and I just think it was such an important piece for people to see, and for people to still know about the story.
Absolutely. Thank you. So Dandelions in the Wind was co-produced with my business partner, Jennifer Dance, who is also the playwright. And this was a musical that she had written many years ago, which involved her personal life, because she is a Caucasian woman that was married to a Black man from Trinidad, and the racism that they faced when they were living in the UK. So what she did was she placed her life story and mixed it in with the civil rights era. And so it was about this interracial relationship, and there was some facts in there about how her parents, Duff played the father. Oh yeah, would have been her father. Yes,
horrible racist.
Yeah,
he play the racist again.
But you know what? You played incredible. That's the thing. You're amazing at what you do. And so it was just so real. Like, it felt like you were in the moment watching this go down. We also intermingled children from like now doing poetry about certain killings that happened recently to Blacks and also Indigenous. And we intermingled all that with the civil rights and just did a 2-hour musical, which was impactful to every audience that showed up. And so we are right now in the midst of bringing that back.
Oh, you are? I didn't know that. Okay.
It's been difficult to bring it back due to funding, but now with the current situation, the climate, we felt this is the best way. I'm not sure if I can get into a bit of my personal story right now with you. I don't know what you're going to ask me, but I kind of wanted to tell you how that came about, us coming back to it, because I've been stressed.
Yeah, I can imagine.
With this whole thing, especially George Floyd's death was the catalyst that broke the emotional dam for me. It actually placed me into the hospital just about a week ago.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not know that. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I was actually in hospital and they thought I had suffered a mild heart attack. But it was actually stress and anxiety related due to everything that's been going on. Also with the pandemic, everything just coming at once. So anyhow, I went for a walk to kind of, bring my blood pressure levels down low. Back to normal. And I was wondering, how can I help? That is one of the things that we feel so helpless. We're just one person, one voice. What can we do? And Dandelions in the Wind came to me. I'm like, we haven't shown this thing in like how many years? Since 2017, I think it is. Yeah. And this is how I feel I'm going to do my part, is by educating the public and our children with this musical. So
Yeah.
we're trying to get it into the school boards so that the schools can come to the show, and also to the general public like we did before.
That goes back to my point, right? It's as I placed myself in this whole situation. We all have to think of what is our role, right, in this whole thing, this massive bubble that's happening. And it's global this time. It is not just regional. It's not just Rodney King for a couple of months and then it's gone, right? This is continuing. The protests are still happening. So it's super important for us to educate. And Quisha, thank you so much. Adrian, so you're actually still working in theater. You actually have just remounted a show that's happening in Texas?
No, what we just finished doing a show. There's a theater here called Theater 3, run by a fellow named Jeffrey Schmidt and Christy Vela. And they felt that sort of Zoom readings and that sort of thing were interesting, but not really capturing what theater was about. And so they took what little money they had left. I mean, they've lost their seasons and everyone down here is canceled, and took what little money they had left and built a little green screen studio, and have managed to be able to film actors at a socially distanced, safe distance against the green screen. We interact with the other actors who are about 40 feet away in the audience, doing our lines to eye lines that are much closer to the camera.
Wow.
And in the end, with the green screen, it'll all look as if we're in a room, and it took quite a bit of preparation, and a little bit of it feels like it's I don't know if you know the children's show Blue's Clues or something, where like Elmo, where there's a virtual background and there's an actor walking through it. Some of it feels like that a bit, but to avoid that, they've decided to make the whole thing black and white. They chose a play from I think it was the most popular regional play in America in 1993, written by Mark Harlick. It's called The Immigrant. It was interesting hearing Laveen's story a little bit beforehand, but it's about a Jewish immigrant who arrives in Galveston, Texas in 1909, and being literally the only Jewish person in the entire state at the time.
Wow.
And he ends up not in Dallas or Houston, but a tiny little community of really very strict Baptists, and how he makes his life over that period of time. They chose it for a lot of reasons, because Texas is an epicenter of a lot of the immigration debate in all of America.
Yeah.
And that there are detention centers at our borders as well as California, Arizona, that sort of thing. And so without trying to be too dogmatic, like the artists that they are, they wanted to illustrate a story. Very much sounds like the play you were working on, in a sense where there is no preachiness to it. What it is illustrating a story, and that the audience is left to question the circumstances of that story, and come away with your own conclusions about how you feel about a myriad of issues.
Well,
because, you know, like with your story, everything is interconnected, and how we as human beings, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to sound too preachy, but I think everything is interconnected, and that, you know, if you make the decision to treat one person with dignity, somewhere inside of you, you're making the decision to treat everyone with dignity. Yeah. And if you don't do that, you yourself are the hypocrite. You are the individual problem within society. And if there's enough of you who are that way, then what we have to, just to go on your talk, but what we have to fight is the change within. Yeah. Not, you know, laws guide us. Symbols tell us what we are supposed to think is right or wrong. Flags say some things, but you know what's in our hearts is what we have to promote. And it seems weird, but I was so happy to hear that the first thing you said was that you were a mother.
Yeah.
Because I truly believe that it is incumbent upon every parent to raise empathetic children. That what our job is not to produce competent workers. Our job is to produce complete human beings with a full set of emotions and at least a willingness to seek and understand outside of themselves.
Right.
That's,
Because they are the future. They are the future cops and they are the future leaders, right? That it starts from the core.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't want to be too hippy dippy or any of that.
You don't look like a hippie at all.
But I mean, for the love of all things that are good, before the show, we were saying that this isn't recent. Laveen was just saying that, go back 50 years. But I was saying, like, really at the core of it all is this whole Western European idea of colonialism and taking over the world, and that there's a natural ruling order or class. And that kind of, pardon my language, bullshit has just got to be erased from the public record or seen for what it is.
Yeah. It's deep seated, that's for sure. I know I was researching a screenplay that we wrote, and I got deep into Canadian history and colonialism and Americans coming up from the States into Canada, and then John A. coming into power and what that all means and what he was doing with the First Nations people, and at the time wasn't really looked upon as it was, but not in that time period. But now we're trying to erase that action, but it all has its place, and that's like such a difficult thing. I heard yesterday. I watched an amazing documentary called "I Am Not Your Negro," and the one
I have to see that.
Yeah, you do. Everyone should see it. And the one guy said a really important thing. I can't remember his name now, but he said that you have to remember that our people built this country, that without us, you would be nothing, right? You're nothing without the immigrants that came, or the slaves who built all the railroads and created the infrastructure, or the Asian people who came and built Canada's railway, and millions died. And that's such an important thing for everyone to remember, like the core of it.
I think you're right. The short memory on everyone's part is a big problem, because it allows some things to continue over and over again. I just want to say, and then I will keep my mouth shut, because I literally in a position where I can honestly say, and I don't say it with any pride or anything other than it just being a factual statement, as a white heterosexual male born in North America, there is no form of oppression I've ever had to feel, other than perhaps economic, and even then, the field is stacked for me to win, and that's just a fact. I mean, there's no getting around that. So my point of view on all of this is apologist, in a sense that I have to apologize for being part of the system that's in place, complicit or not, willing or not. I think, again, I'll say the journey starts with at home, and you have to look at your own sort of circle of influence and who you control and who controls you, and who you love and who loves you, and what you are putting out into the world. So I have nothing to say on oppression or systemic racism, other than, willing or not, I know I'm part of the system.
Yeah.
My choice as an individual has to reach out in my circle to all of the people of color who I'm friends with and have worked with, and individually reach out to them and say, I want nothing from you. I want to be able just to say to you that I love you and know that change has to happen. That's it.
Yeah.
And then just to address the things that you asked about COVID for this thing,
Mm.
I think your numbers may be wrong on Houston. The city proper might be that, but Houston is part of Harris County in Texas,
Right.
and it is
Yeah, that was city
number
proper.
2
That.
hotspot in America right now.
Okay.
And some of the reasons, and going to systemic racism, some of the reasons that you'll see weird things like certain counties have
Jumps.
really high numbers is
Yeah.
because it's where they hold prisons.
Oh.
And the population of that county is dictated by the prison that is there.
Well,
And federal and state prisons are ripe with this disease. And federal and state prisons are overrun with people of color for no good reason, other than it is an extension of
poverty
or
right.
slavery issues from,
Right.
If you read the 13th Amendment, it is a way in order to basically extend the privilege of being a slave owner without actually owning a slave.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
That's
it's
correct.
sort of within those sort of guidelines. Anyway, that's what I had to say. I mean, I wanted to come on your show and say, yeah, you know what? COVID is shitty. Not a lot of people in Texas take it serious, or take it seriously, I should speak properly. And that it is, I think 3 years from now, we're going to go, oh, wow, we didn't know a whole hell of a lot about what we were doing while we were doing it, as the science evolves and our understanding grows.
Well, yes.
As it ties into race and culture, yes, even if you look at neighborhoods in my city by their zip code, basically the same as your postal code in Canada, you will see that neighborhoods that are predominantly economically challenged, neighborhoods that are predominantly with people of color, both the African American and Latino communities, some people of Southeast Asian descent. Those areas are the areas that are hardest hit, where the least amount of money is being spent by public health to help mitigate those circumstances. And like all things in America, yeah, it's race related.
Well, that's
the very last thing I want to say is white liberal guilt often shields people from seeing themselves for who they are. And the play that you did reminds me of a play I did based on Native Canadian relations. And one of the things I found out while researching that play was that, we used to yell our head off about South Africa and the apartheid system, but they based their colored, non-colored, black, non-black system of categorizing people on Canada's status and non-status native system. They came here and studied our system. So we are equally as responsible for some of the legislation in South Africa for apartheid as anybody else.
right.
So
I didn't know that.
keep
That's
my mouth
interesting.
shut for the rest of the play because I just babbled on.
No,
That is
continue
not-
talking.
Right, Keith.
is
That's
great.
that is not babble, right?
That's not babble. That's education.
Yes.
That's
And
knowledge.
so you were, and over to you, Laveen. Like, I know that you, speaking about numbers and about poverty, and you are in Chicago, which is one of the hottest spots for a lot of violence, actually, and a lot of COVID cases. What is it like living there for you?
Luckily, I'm in the suburbs, so it's not so bad. But there have been some riots and stuff. Well, not now, but in the past week or so, riots and lootings not far from where I am. But in the immediate area where I am at my hotels, luckily they have not been harmed, knock on wood. But the Oakbrook Mall, the Yorktown Mall, which is 1 to 3 miles away from us, closed down. There was a Best Buy just about a couple miles away from the hotel, completely destroyed, ruined. So
Really?
you see all of this in your neighborhood. You're fearful, like, what if it affects your business?
Yeah. And are the protests still happening there in Chicago? Continuing?
That I'm aware of, it's peaceful. There still are. There was some a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
But they're more peaceful right now. The riots and the break-ins, lootings seem to have stopped. I'm sure there's one or two sporadic here and there, but nothing that cannot be managed as compared to a week or two back.
I wanted to also discuss with you as a person of color. Were you born in Chicago, in the States?
No, I immigrated here 22 years ago.
Oh, okay. So what was that experience like for you coming to America? That seems to be the dream for everybody, right? But
Well, I've been fortunate enough to live a good part of my life outside of India, where I was born.
right.
I lived in Africa actually for about 5 years. Lived in UK. I did live in the States for about a year. I was 15 years old,
Mhm.
and then but I finally immigrated here when I was 23 years old. So I'm 40.
Are you there with your family?
My parents, my sister, we all came together 22 years
Okay.
ago.
And was it part of what they call chain migration? Was it like one person and then everyone
Uh,
else?
My aunt sponsored us back in '85. So
Oh, okay.
we moved here in '98, and
And
that was the process.
as a person of color living in the States, how has that experience been for you?
I'm not going to deny that I haven't experienced any racism my end. Accent being one, people can say that I was not born here, I'm not from here.
Right.
9/11 happened shortly after I came here, just about 3 years after. And one of the questions where a lot of people would just randomly ask me, which they didn't seem to care before that, but
Mhm.
care more so in like September, October, November, right after 9/11, is where you from?
Yeah, I actually,
Hmm.
that's an important, I forgot about that whole post 9/11 stigma. It's sort of like, yeah, asking, sitting in a cab, and saying, so where are you from? And the cabbie pondering if to tell me or not, right? It still exists. And so that's an interesting thing for you went through that whole phase.
And I have to say that was asked of me from, I mean, I will say a majority of white people, but there were other races that would also ask me that.
Right.
They, and I've experienced different racist comments over the years.
Yeah.
I think it's part of not. It's part of, I guess, not being born here. Perhaps maybe just having a different way of life, a different way of expressing how you live, a different. I'm trying to find the right word over here. Different upbringing.
Yeah.
Different
Right.
process. So you kind of questioned certain things that you normally may not have been questioned.
Right. And you were also discussing that it was easier for people to get a job or work their way into society in the States if you were even if you were a person of color, if you were from the States instead of from another country, right? Which I find intriguing.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think if you get a job here, I came here 22 years back. I absolutely worked hard, worked my ass off hard. And over the years, I started to invest and grow. And how I feel is it goes back to how you were brought up. And I believe Adrian mentioned that, and he actually complimented Quisha, saying that the first thing she said is, "I'm a mother," and that's her taking pride in what she is first. And Adrian mentioned something to that effect. It's how you're raised. Parents play an important role in your growing up, in how you're brought up, in what values you have, in what cultures you have in your head.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that you grew up in a small town, population 800, with 5 or 6 churches, completely white. But look at yourself. How did you grow up on your own, and you moved to a bigger city, bigger area, and you saw black people, people of color, Indian people, and you made friends.
Which I love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you made friends with them, and you're like, hey, it's the same as me. Do not just look at the black and brown, but look at the person inside. Now, every race has bad apples, whether it's black, whether it's Indian, whether it's white. Absolutely. Every race has bad apples. But you have to look at the good in people. You have to look at how what positiveness do they bring
Yeah.
in life. And I feel I was raised in a way like work hard, stand on your own 2 feet, and you can achieve anything.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
And
No matter
I
who you are, right?
Absolutely. And I believe the same about every race. I mean, if you're black, you're white, you're Indian, you're Asian, Chinese, Hispanic, you work hard. You know, I have staff that are Hispanic staff. A lot of my staff are Hispanic, whether it's Mexican or South American. I have a Middle Eastern employee, have a couple of African American employees, and I have a completely mixed race staff. And there's a couple of my employees that will work their asses off 60, 70, 80 hours a week. They have 2 jobs to make a better life for their kids, for their future. I mean, maybe it's a little late for them. They're a little bit older. But the ideal thought of every parent, and I'm sure Quisha can perhaps attest here, is that what can I do better for my son or for my daughter to have a better, safer, prosperous future than what I've had? I need to have a better life tomorrow than what I have today. And I think if every parent thinks that way, and they should think that way, I think this will be a better society in every aspect.
Well, that brings up an interesting point that I wanted to ask Quisha. What type of conversations are you having with your son?
So my son, he's 13 years old. So he is quite inquisitive and very observant. So as a parent, you try to shelter them from things, but with social media and YouTube, you know, they can see everything. And so we've had our conversations. He knows that I'm worried. I tell him, you know, be careful. You know, like I said, because of the color of your skin, there are some people that just don't like you.
Right.
So, you know, be careful. Like, I'm paranoid when he's riding his bike outside. Will someone come and just try and run him over because of his color? Will they shout out the N-word at him? You know, I'm mama bear, right? Yeah. So we're having these conversations and I'm being real with him. I think the most important thing is to tell your kids exactly how it is.
The reality, right?
The reality of it all, because we cannot shelter them forever. No. You know, for instance, sex, you know, we broad daylight, I'm watching TV and I think I switched the channel 3 or 4 times and there's some huge sex scene going on. And my son's like, yeah, what's going on? And I just went and, you know, got something from the fridge and I said, they're having sex. Like, you know, how many times can I change the channel?
It's inevitable.
Right. Yeah. I'm like, they're having sex. Yeah. Right. So my wish is that he, you know, waits till he finds that right person. You know, but we have these open conversations because then I want him to be able to talk to me about anything and everything. I don't want him to feel like he can't because I will freak out or anything like that. Yeah. So even when it comes to racism, we definitely have the chat. I wasn't talking to him too much about it until now because everything is just so in the mainstream media.
Yeah.
So, and his father is a police officer.
Oh.
He is a black man and he is a police officer. He's actually a sergeant in the Toronto Police Force. So I have actually spoken to him and said, you know, I would like for you to have a conversation with your son about who you are. You're a black man and you are a police officer.
Yeah.
That he probably is afraid of.
Right. Yeah.
So how does that work?
Well, that's, I heard an interesting conversation of a family who they're a white family and a black family, and their kids were best friends. And they had a huge blowout because the one woman said, your kid doesn't go through what my kid, when my kid turns 16, I have to talk to him. When I give him the car, I have to talk to my conversation is completely different than your conversation when your kid gets the car, right? If you get stopped, it's a completely different thing.
Right.
You know, be kind, be nice to the officer. Like it's, you know, there's anything can happen, especially in the States. It's, I think, quite a bit worse. I think you guys would
it's
agree.
way more prevalent in the States.
Yeah,
but it is happening here. It has happened here.
Right. Well, yes,
I have
with
friends.
Regis, yeah.
I have a woman who I call, she's like my aunt, and she has 3 boys, Black woman, Black family. She said back in the day, her son, Ryan, would get stopped constantly. She bought him a car. They'd ask him, who paid for this car? Where did you get this car? One point in time, she was actually following behind her son when the cops stopped him.
Wow.
And she got out of her car to say, why are you stopping my son? And she said, I paid for this car.
Yeah.
And the cop told her to shut up.
Seriously.
Shut up and get in your car.
Wow.
So it's become almost the norm in the Black community to start, you know, getting your children ready for the real world like that. Okay, say this, make sure your hands are on the wheel. Don't stretch for anything. Don't move. Whatever you do, that should not be the case.
No,
Ever.
No. It's I actually had a horrible experience in LA one time. I rented a car and I was staying with my friend, and I came out of my friend's apartment, and there was someone sitting in my car, hot wiring it, and I was, what the hell is going on? So I knew this guy who was a police officer who was the landlord, and I said, can you come out and help me? I came back out again, and before he called the cops. At the time, it was around the Rodney King time, actually, the 3 or 4 cop cars surrounded, and I was in the middle, and I was standing by the car because I was saying to this kid in my car, I'm like, get the hell out of my car, get the fuck out of my car, what are you doing? And I was yelling, right? And the cops came up and they were like, whose car is this? And I'm like, it's mine, it's my car. And so then I walked over to the officer and I said, what is happening? Why are there so many police here? And he said, hey, this is, you know, so many cops get shot. So many police are shot. We have to go through this full thing. The guy could have a shotgun underneath his seat. And it was like, it was my first sort of like, well, I mean, I've never had a gun pointed at me in my whole life. So, but I really got the sort of the idea of what was happening, right? In terms of like that racial sort of like, oh, he's a guy of color, we just assume he has a gun, when actually it was just like a little Mexican guy stealing my car, and that's all he wanted, was just to get the car, you know. He had no intention, but they would have shot him if I hadn't explained to them, right, what was happening, that he was a little nutso and he was just hot wiring the car. So insanity.
I'm just going to say that it feels, I mean, an observation. Quisha, I'm also the son of immigrants. And Laveen, you arrived in the States at an age, and we all come from backgrounds where I think our worldview is that we're not just insular. We're not just from where we're from. We have our experience, if not like you, Laveen, of a life before you arrived in North America. But Quisha, you and I believe, probably have a vicarious and very vivid understanding of what Jamaica was like, even though before you went there, you know what I mean? Like your parents very clearly described it. I know I did as well. I think all of us have the benefit of having been to more than one place. My understanding of the States is that it's very myopic here, in that there are a lot of people who've never been anywhere else.
It's true.
Right. Yeah.
Very true.
And when they're told they have the best healthcare, they go, "Oh, well, we must." You know,
because they have nothing to compare it to, right?
When they're told they have the best legal and judicial system, they go, "Well, we must."
Yeah.
We're America. They grew up believing about American exceptionalism and a variety of other things that never were true, but are certainly not holding up to the spotlight these days.
Yes.
Anyway, I relate this all back to the fact that Laveen, what you had said, and Quisha, my daughter is also 13, extremely curious, has a life in and of her own that is separate, an intellect that, up until a certain point, your children share your intellect, share your views, share your, and then they start to feel the world out for themselves. And
yeah. And that's
the
something
world
you can't
that my
control.
daughter is growing up into, and the world that your son and, pardon me, Laveen, do you have children?
No, I'm actually gay.
Oh, okay.
So gay.
Hey,
That doesn't preclude you from having children.
Yeah, you could still have children and be gay.
Yeah.
Laveen,
But-
you and I can
so-
get kids. We'll have kids someday.
Yeah, well, so the what I find interesting is that the world that we are bringing our children up into, and the examples that we have to give for what I would say is moral or character guidelines or role models, there aren't a lot of really great people who we have to hold that we can hold them, show them. I'm sorry for being so weak with my words. That's why I believe in personal circles and really looking at who you love and who you associate with, and start small and start spreading from there, personal examples. But at the same time, it's obvious to me that we live in a world where personal property is more important than people's lives, that the worship of money is more important than coming to whatever kind of spiritual center you need to find in your life. Sometimes being part of a group is more important than knowing who you are, and all of those pressures on, well, you, Laveen, when you were 23 coming here, or Quisha, our children when they arrived, it is a very much more difficult world than I would say than when I was 13 years old. And I don't envy the children of the future, but I do also want to say that I think with like-minded people, even amongst us, I'm sure there's some differing views, but even amongst like-minded people, the work we have ahead of us is extremely difficult. And there is no hoping or hugging our way through it. I mean, the conversation I had with my daughter was, listen, like you say, there are going to be people who dislike your son because of his skin color. I told my daughter the other day, there are going to be people with us who are not cool with us. And they have every right to feel that way because they've got 400 years of history in this country saying they're not cool with us. It's our job not to be offended and still make the right decision.
Right.
We still have to do the right thing. We still have to extend the olive branch no matter what.
Well, that's what I find intriguing, is that after all this time, after having a black president in 2 terms, right? That I'm quite interested in that, in your viewpoints on that. How, after having a black president, and actually Canada has never had anyone of color in our parliament, or sort of as a prime minister, which I also find kind of shocking because we're such a multicultural place, right? But how do you think? Why do you think after all this time, after having a black president, especially in the States, that we're going through this? Why is it? Do you think that Obama? Do you think that it made it worse that he was in power? Do you think the underbelly was sort of it actually grew?
I feel Obama should have done more. I personally do.
You do.
I definitely feel, and I think a lot of people feel he should have done more.
Right.
I mean, he was great at a lot of things that he did. Definitely, as far as the gay rights and the gay marriage, what no one was able to do.
That's true.
And I will give him 100% credit there. I mean, I think the entire LGBTQ community will always respect him for that. A lot of people will. I really think as a black president, as the only president of the states that is outside of a white man, he really should have done more. I think in certain ways he was, if I may call it loosely, he was a little bit weak on certain things.
You mean in terms of race relations and the healing of the nation in that regard?
I think when the Ferguson, Missouri issue happened, he
Right.
had an opportunity to bring people closer, to see people, to see the light. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
I forget that was a huge thing. Lots of riots and
right, lots of riots in the Ferguson area. That didn't spread to the entire country or the world like the last 2-3 weeks have. But
so I wonder why now? Why what's the difference between Ferguson and now? Between George Floyd, Ferguson was much fiery than what happened with, you know, not to demean what happened with George Floyd, but why do you think it happened now and not then?
Well, I just want to jump in. I feel that I don't think that Obama was weak. I think that he had a lot of people that were pulling strings and putting obstacles in his way. And when you get obstacles in your way, you become weak. You become depleted. And so as him being the first Black president, I think there was a burden on his shoulders.
Oh, huge. Yeah.
Huge burden on his shoulders to act a certain way, to do certain thing. I think a lot of the Black community, people who are non-Caucasian, wanted him to do this. And there's just so much he could do in an 8-year period.
Yeah.
So I appreciate all he's done. Now, if we step forward to what you're talking about now, Duff, I think the difference is you have a president that has released the white supremacists, the races out of their cages. They were kind of quiet for the 8 years.
Under Obama.
Yeah. They were like, now they came out with vengeance, and they were like, yeah, we're going to make America great again.
Yeah. Right.
So this is why I think it's so different. So pile that on with the pandemic, everyone's being isolated in isolation mode. Lockdown, their finances are dwindling. People aren't making money. I don't know exactly what America did with helping their people. I heard that money was not really all there to help them with.
Yeah.
But they gave one person, I think, $2 million who already has money. And that's another story.
Right. The corporations. Yeah.
So all that piled in together. And then you see a cop killing someone with putting their disrespect knee in his neck.
Yeah.
Just made the entire community just go, okay, we are done. Yeah. I think if it was a different atmosphere where things were just normal, unfortunately, I think we'd have been we'd riot one day, couple of days, and then they go on their merry way. Because again, this is something that we have been used to seeing, and people haven't been hearing our voices so loud and clear. So now with all of it, and I look at it as a blessing in disguise. The Bible talks about, and I'm a Christian, the Bible talks about, the Lord uses whatever was used for evil for good.
Mm-hmm.
And that George Floyd's death caused everyone to go, okay, we're done. We're going to march on here. And so, I think that's the big difference. It's just the climate, everything that's going on right now in the world has changed everyone's perspective.
Yeah, that's what I meant by COVID. It's all intertwined. It's like a symbiotic thing that happened, right? It's like everything. I call it divine order in my life, when bad things happen along with good, and then it all sort of seems to work out in some sort of miracle way.
Yeah,
it's all, whether it's bad or good, it all has its order and it all has its place in the greater scheme of things, right?
Absolutely, and it's so unfortunate about George Floyd's death. But then you see his little daughter on her uncle's shoulder saying, "My daddy changed the world. Yeah. My daddy changed the world." Global, and I just remember, global world. And I was crying. My dad said he had tears. in his eyes hearing her say that, right? So that young little mind, yes, she lost her daddy, but she sees the greater good of it as well.
Yeah.
In the whole scheme of things. So
I have a wonderful quote that I found and sort of put this out to you guys. And it was, you can't talk about racism without talking about white supremacy. And you can't talk about that without talking about Christianity, the root of racism. Do you guys agree with that?
Absolutely.
Right.
And I'm a Christian. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I'm no expert on American history or anything. I'm just going to say that a lot of what you say, Quisha, is absolutely right. It's a compound of things happening over and over again. This is not the first Black man we've watched suffocated to death,
right,
by a handheld camera with people standing by watching.
So many.
In New York City for selling cigarettes. Sandra Bland here in Dallas. This is not the first time. So there's if you think to going back to, in Obama's term, Trayvon Martin. I'm just going to address what you asked about Obama and go to Christianity on that. Okay. Listen, he was accused of not being a Christian. He was accused of being a radical Christian. He was accused of being a Kenyan. He was accused of a lot
non-American.
of things. Yeah. So there's, in terms of what our expectation of one man, I think, like America, it's like, oh, well, we elected a Black guy. That problem's fixed. And
right.
It had, it's never been fixed.
Never.
We had a civil war. Well, that solved everything. Well, there was no clear victor in the Civil War.
No.
It wasn't,
they didn't win.
The Confederacy lost and the North won, but there was no clear victor.
No,
the border stayed the same. Yeah. The trade policy stayed the same. Slavery, because of the 13th Amendment, became embedded in a underpaid workforce that were indentured to the people that they worked with.
Which actually came into Canada too.
Ever solved, and it's not one person's responsibility or even job to fix all of it.
No.
What I think Obama did better than anyone else was not emotionally react, but with his powerful intellect, ask people to examine these issues. But we're an emotional people. So when we see a bright man ask us to use our mind on the public stage, we go, well, why isn't he as outraged as we are? Why isn't he holding a burning flag? And then there's that end of it. Or we get, like systemic racism. There's a third of this country that didn't believe he had an intellect, didn't believe that he was Harvard educated, didn't believe. So if you're asking about the States, there was, a very famous German filmmaker who said, listen, America, you're having to face what we faced in the 30s, which is that you have to come to an understanding that 1/3 of your population would easily kill another third of your population while the final third watched. And that's what happened in Germany. And that's the tinderbed of or tinderbox of emotions, politics, health that's going on down here. There is 1/3 of the population that are born and bred into an idea that they are, for some reason, God-given, superior to other people. There's a third of the population that doesn't really care, and then there's a third of a population that is their target.
Yeah, very interesting. And also coming from Saskatchewan, I think that we forget that people are sequestered. People are in remote areas. I've toured all over the USA, and I realized that there are areas there where people don't even go. There are no hospitals. They sit like my parents did. They sit in their little house in the middle of nowhere and watch the television and gleam and ingest all of the media, right? Which is probably one of two channels in my family. It was. And that's what they believe. They believe whatever they've been told on their little square. And now it's internet, but some places don't even have internet. They're like you said, Adrian, they're going off of what somebody is saying. Oh, everything's fine in your state. Great. Everything is fine, I guess, For you, Laveen, your family is all there in Chicago, right?
Yes, for the most part.
Um,
My folks are stuck there
right.
in India. They're not able to fly back because of the whole airports being closed and stuff.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
As a gay man, so I actually have found this quite interesting in terms of I'm just going to go back to COVID for a little bit. Because you and I probably lived through the whole HIV/AIDS era. What are your views on what's happening with that and with the gay community in Chicago, and how are you coping, and how is that community coping?
To be honest with you, I'm not very sure about that because I was not in the States when the whole HIV thing. I was in India in the mid 80s, and being gay in India was a crime until only about a year and a half ago. So, but of course, India has a lot of HIV/AIDS cases now in recent years. But I was a kid actually in the 80s.
Oh, damn. Okay.
And like I said, that aside, it was like unspoken of, like the whole thing about being gay. And India is a very, like, you don't speak about certain things, you don't do certain things. It's kind of, certain things are like hush hush. So
yeah.
So right about the time where the AIDS stuff was going on, I was like 9 years old.
Right. Oh, geez. I guess I'm older than I. Well, I'm super intrigued. I wanted to throw this out to you guys. Like, I'm really intrigued with people having relations during this whole time, right? Because to me, it's very similar to HIV and AIDS, and where we would say just assume everyone's positive. What are your views on that, you guys?
Well, I think being a gay man, in a relationship for the last 3 years plus, but let's say I was not, I would definitely say in today's day and age, you gotta be careful, you gotta be protective. I mean, there's no ifs and buts about it. I know they don't have a cure for it, but they have like different things that can prolong your life, and you take a pill, you take this, you take that, but end of the day, if you don't care about yourself first, no one else will.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with Laveen. Exactly what he said.
Yeah. Well, I actually had a couple of points here, and I wanted to just bring up that I'm going back to racist relations again, and I just wanted to put this out to everyone watching, and for you guys too, is that I was reading that there are different forms of racism, and I found this quite intriguing. So number one, there's epistemic racism, which is the domination of knowledge of human relationships. Number two, there's structural racism, that's social exclusion. Number three, there's symbolic racism, which is sort of a hard to discern level of racism that you're like, I'm not sure if they're being racist or not, but that's symbolic. And then number four is embodied racism, which is physical violence, poor health, colorblindness, racial differences that are not significant. So do you guys have any views on that, on different types of racism that exist, or do you think that it's
I have what I call driving racism, which is, I think anyone who drives a vehicle at some point has looked to see who was driving the other vehicle and somehow
which could be just an old guy.
That particular bad behavior and that entire race.
That's very true.
You know what? That is so true. I remember I was living in an area of Toronto, just moved, and we were getting car insurance, and the car insurance prices just went skyrocketing in this area. So called up the insurance company, and I'm like, what's going on here? The person said, not a word of a lie on the phone, said, it's because of all the Asians in your area. I was
Wow.
actually shocked
Wow.
that they
Well,
said that.
that's a case of systemic racism right there.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But
Just
it was
need
an
to-
insurance company, big
Yeah.
name company, saying this
Yikes.
on the phone with me. And I had to
Oh.
look at the phone and go, did they really just say that? And
Yeah.
and I myself have been in Asia, sang there and lived there for a few months. And I think the understanding for people is when you actually go into someone else's climate, someone else's where they live, you get a better understanding
Yeah.
of why things are why, right? So
Yeah.
for instance, like, oh my goodness, Asia, like Hong Kong is so overpopulated that it's like driving down there, it's like they do triple parallel parking down there. Okay.
And a lot of people on bikes too, right?
And a lot of people on bikes. So
Triple.
I started to understand, oh, okay, I get why they drive the way they do. I hate saying that, but there's a certain way. Like you go to India, there's a way that they drive just to get through things.
Absolutely.
You know, I've been to Sri Lanka. You know,
Yeah.
I love Sri Lanka. And listen, my taxi driver ran over someone's back of their foot to get me to the spa. How horrible did I feel? But they were just like, let's go. But in Jamaica, you don't stop at a red light. You don't stop at a red light in Kingston because at night, that's when gunmen come out and they start shooting. So you drive through that light. Right. So you have to get an understanding of people's culture and understanding, you know, before you can say, oh, in a racist way, oh, they're just like all like that. Or you peep over to see who's driving. See, I knew it was that type of a, you know, so it's very interesting.
Quisha, I couldn't agree with you more on a lot of what you said. I am dating a white guy, born in the States, from New York, but has moved to Northwest Indiana, and he's a doctor, so he encounters Indian patients and Indian doctors. But seeing them for 5 minutes doesn't mean that he knows what it is to have grown up in India or stuff like that. About a year and a half ago, we made a trip to India, and he kind of experienced for his firsthand, like, holy shit, like this, you know,
this is real.
You can say all you want, you can watch movies, but till you're in the middle of Bombay, like seeing all the traffic, seeing the way of life, seeing how restaurants are, seeing how waiters are, seeing the different aspects, I think it takes a different understanding, a different level of respect, like that light bulb in your head.
Right. It just goes, oh, okay, I get it.
So that's actually, go ahead, Adrian.
Sorry, I just want the best way I've ever heard India described, and I have to tell you, I grew up with a very close friend of my father, Chapel Bhattacharya, who ran the first Indian restaurant chain in Montreal, and I spent my time around tandoori ovens in my childhood, making and eating Indian food as a little white boy in the kitchen. So
you're making me hungry, Adrian.
Me too. To Indian culture earlier on, but I don't understand it. I don't claim to fully understand it. But the best way it was by Chapel, he described it to me. He said, listen, in America, there are 350 million people. There's the very, very poor and the very, very rich. Take that 350 million people and assume that is the middle of the hamburger in India, because above the very, very rich in America, there are 400 million people more rich than that in India. And below the very poorest person in America, there are 400 million people poorer than that in India. So you have no understanding of what that country is.
Yes.
Right. Every state has a different culture, different region, different language. I mean, every state has different food cuisines. So literally you go from one state to another. You go from east to northeast to west to north. It's like a whole new culture out there.
But I think
it's really interesting if you think that because we were talking about religion, somewhere like Lahore, Pakistan, and Punjab share culturally more in common with food and things that even though the religions say they're apart,
Yes.
those two sets of people share more than people in the South who are Vindaloo and that sort of thing. It's a very interesting dynamic.
You know why?
Yeah. It's very interesting. You have to open your mind up to wanting to understand the culture before you shut people down.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing for me. I'm so happy that in my early, late teens into my 20s that I got to travel and be in these places and go to Thailand and all these wonderful places, because it made me understand people even more. And I love that. Like, I went to America. I didn't understand certain things. Being around Americans, now I understand a few things. Like, I'm not fully educated, but I get it.
Yeah.
Right. And it opens your heart to people more. And I think what Adrian said in terms of, or was it Laveen? I can't remember which one. But you guys said that a lot of Americans have not even left America. They don't even know what's going on. So they think everything is supposed to be a certain way. And so I think once we start taking in other people's cultures, our hearts will grow bigger. I want to add also in all the terms of racism, there is colorism as well. Colorism is huge even in Jamaica. You know, the lighter skin you are, the better jobs you have.
Sure.
Right? And I was in Cuba, and yes, Black people do get tans. I had to say that because a lot of people don't think. A lot of people don't think we get tan, but I'm like, we do. I change colors. I have to change my foundation.
I got sunburned. I was like, I'm Indian. How can I get a tan? How can I get burned?
We get burnt. We can get burnt. So it was so funny. I was in Cuba and I am wearing the cutest Victoria's Secret crochet bikini. It was white. I got darker. And there is a Caucasian woman asking me to get her one of the beach chairs.
Ooh.
And I was darker, and I had to look behind me. I was like, she couldn't be talking to me. And
like,
I said, I don't work here.
Yeah.
I'm actually a guest at the resort. I paid money to come here.
Yeah.
Right. So there is colorism, or the other term is shadeism.
For sure.
Sure.
Well, there's elitism too.
When I've gone to like an Indian grocery store or even just a regular grocery store, depending on what shirt I will wear, like maybe it's just like a plain polo and they think it's part of the uniform. I've asked a couple of customers just randomly ask me, where's this or where's that? And I'm like, I'm a shopper here just like you. I think that's more ignorance. I'm not sure that's racism per se.
Yeah, that's ignorance.
It's more ignorance, more being stupid and not being outside the box.
But you know what, Laveen? I also take that. I'd like to try and turn things in a positive manner. But I also look at it as perhaps your energy is so friendly that they were drawn to you to ask you.
Approachable, right?
Yeah, you're approachable, right? Because not a lot of people like to just talk to somebody. I am that person that will talk to you in a grocery line, anybody, and I'll have your phone number before I check out.
Yeah.
You know, that's just me. I'll talk to anybody, but you probably have this aura about you that you are so approachable that it's not nothing to do with the color shirt you're wearing or anything. But
I mean, look at that cute face. It's like you have a permanent smile on your face.
Right?
Adrian, on the other hand.
That you can get me a phone number at the grocery checkout line.
Yeah, we'd be chatting. We'd be like friends. Like, I'd be like, let's talk, you know?
I have to say, when I shave my head and have a beard, I get looks for sure. It has nothing to do with color, but I get looks for sure. If people following me around in the store, like,
yeah, you know, sure. I've been. Sorry,
people make assumptions. Sorry, go on. Keisha.
Oh yeah,
no, go ahead, Adrian.
I was just saying, people, you know, because of the way I look, people make assumptions about who I am and what my politics are, and it's interesting to watch that happen. What I am I feel like I'm Jim Carrey in whatever that movie where he plays an idiot in every movie. Dumb and Dumber, but where
Dumb and Liar.
Yeah, or something. Someone's just walking out of a 7-Eleven. He goes, "Oh, you got the big gulp, eh?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm that guy who will talk to anybody just based on anything."
Yeah,
and maybe that's something all three of us have in common.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
But it certainly helps if you want to initiate a conversation, to have someone like Quisha or Laveen around to help start the conversation.
Yeah.
To even start, they go, it's okay. If you want to touch my beard, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm a little reserved, but I would follow Quisha. Outgoing. I'm a little reserved, like until I get to know the person. Once I get to know the person, then I can take over. But if it's a complete stranger, I'm like, here you go, Quisha, take the.
Yeah. I love to get to know people. I really am a people person, and like I remember when I was in South Korea, and this was back in 1997. I had braids in my hair, and they were like two-tone colors, like a blonde and brown. And these women were coming up and like wanting to touch my hair. They're speaking in Korean and they're grabbing onto my hair and they're looking at it and they're fascinated.
Like a
and I'm like, okay, yeah, don't pull, it will hurt, but just touch. But they were fascinated. And I think there is so much that we can do to teach. That's what we need to do, is teach, learn, get into the minds, especially our young children.
Yeah.
Right? That's where it needs to start.
That's my whole point. And exactly.
And I think it's a lot of the problem is it's curiosity. People want to know. It's not necessarily race. It's not necessarily racism, colorism, or what are we going to call it? I think it's curiosity to know what's different about you.
Right. But when it changes, Laveen,
I think it's everything else.
But when that changes is when you put anger.
Yeah.
Into
for whatever reason, right?
Yeah, for some reason. If you put anger into it, it changes the whole dynamic, and it's
anger, fear. There's a lot of people selling fear.
Fear,
there's a lot of people pushing that, even though there's very little to be afraid of in the modern world.
That's right.
Like the disease, this virus is something to be afraid of, but there's a lot of people pushing fear. I have to just relate one more story to you, Laveen, and you might get a kick out of this, Quisha. I don't know. There's a weird kind of call it white liberal topsy-turvy racism, which is bestowing upon people a good quality that isn't there to begin with as well, right? So it's and in a weird way, that's kind of an upside down racism. And I remember being at a party as a young boy in the 70s with Chapel and this really beautiful sort of blonde-haired white woman in a lace dress came up and sort of namaste'd him and said, "Your people are so beautiful in the understanding and aligning your chakras and getting it." And Chapel turned to her and said, "You have no idea the shit in my country. You have no idea how shitty it can be there."
Yeah.
Right? Like, you may think that about us, but there is so much more going on, right?
Yeah, he got real.
It is infantilizing or making childlike assumptions about people that I think is probably just as dangerous as making negative assumptions.
Yeah, it's like
absolutely.
a delusional.
There needs to be instead of swinging the pendulum so far one side and the other side, it should be a balance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think we solved everything, didn't we?
I was going to say, you guys, I was going to not ask for a solution, but I think we have the solution. Great minds. But I think you guys really did hit on the main point, which is knowledge and educating whoever, children, elderly. I always looked at my parents as I wanted to bring them into the next way of thinking. I wanted to introduce them to gay life. I wanted to introduce them to race relations and get to know. I brought my mom to, El Convento Rico, which is a Latin club in Toronto, and she had never seen Drag Queens #1, but then all on top of that, everyone was was Latin and like black and white, and everybody was there. And she was like her. I could just see she was like a child. Her mind just opened, and I wish to everybody who has children that they will take their children and travel with their children and educate them about, like you guys are saying, about all these different points. That is the key, because those are the people that are the leaders, the future leaders. And this generation has been born into this. Imagine, right? I was born into the late 60s, early 70s. Things were kind of still, things were being fixed, but it was, by the time the 80s came, it was a big party. But like this generation, it's so important for us to educate them, and because they are the people that are going to lead and, you know, come up with a solution.
Yeah. May I add?
Yeah.
Love.
Yes.
Love your neighbor.
Yeah.
As yourself. Like, you know, I remember when my neighbor moved in, and I believe they're from Egypt. And actually, they were just coming to look at the house, and I so happened to be outside. And I was just like, hi, how are you guys? You know, are you looking at this house? Oh, and I was telling them all about the neighborhood, and we were chatting. They told me because of how I treated them is why they chose to move there, because it's so important to have good neighbors beside you that you can chat with.
Yeah.
So we sometimes bump into each other on our porches, and we're just chatting away, talking. I have actually taken care of their fish. It died actually, but that's another story.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it died, and I replaced it. They didn't know. Hopefully they're not watching. So, so like things like that, it just love.
Yeah.
If
You're
we
right,
learn
Quisha.
to just love each other,
a
lot of the things that are going on in this world would not be happening.
Yeah.
Take away the fear and put love in there, and we've got it.
I agree with you, Quisha. And I think a large part of our problems that have been created are by, if I may read a quote, actually, that'll bring us this. This is by Ben Carson. He said that we have been conditioned to think that only politicians can solve our problems, but at some point, maybe we will wake up and recognize that it is the politicians that have created them. I mean, we have to, exactly what you said in a summary, we have to educate our kids, we have to travel, we have to get to know other people, we have to get to know other races, other colors, way of life. Understand why are people different, why are gay people this way, why are straight people this way, why are black people this way, why are Asian people this way, and understand different colors of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You know what? I find that in the industry that I'm in, the music industry, the arts industry, people love you. They love you when they see you on stage and you're singing their favorite song, whatever it is, or you're performing, you're acting. And I found myself in the last couple of weeks saying, why can't they just love me? Just love me without the arts behind me.
Right.
Why can't they just love me for who I am? And that's the part I've been struggling with, because there's quite a few people that have not spoken out, who are, they say they're fans, and they have not spoken out. So leaves me to question, okay, so what's so different about me? Or you've heard people say, oh, but you're different. But I'm black. No, but you're different. What does that mean?
Right. Yeah. I heard an interesting quote by Lil Wayne. You know who Lil Wayne? Lil Wayne.
Yeah, rapper.
That he would do concerts, and he misses the days when he'd look out and see thousands of kids and they were all white. Like he looked down in the front row and all of these young kids were spouting off his lyrics.
Yeah.
All white.
Yeah.
Which I found like shocking. But
listen,
also,
the weddings industry, when I would sing in the wedding bands,
you
put on a Biggie Smalls track and that dance floor is bopping. And it always would blow my mind because I'm like,
Yeah.
they love us. They love our culture. They love what we do,
Yeah.
but they don't love us.
Yeah. Which is a judgment on, I guess, history or their sort of way of thinking of what people are like from the history. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I
The
think so.
systemic
It's systemic.
part, right?
It is
Yeah.
systemic. Yeah.
So it's
Well, think about
actually
it too.
bridging.
The only real, if you were to say America as a new world country, the only real art forms that they have offered to the rest of the world have all been derived from African and Caribbean roots.
Yes.
Jazz, hip hop, beat poetry, all of that stuff. I mean, it's so much so that it took, in order for it to be popular
roll.
amongst white Christians,
Yeah.
white guys imitating it, from
Yes.
like Elvis Presley to Eminem. If you think about it, the real art forms, and it's so funny, Quisha, or not funny, it's so telling that you say that you are loved as an artist and the art that you put forward, but then there are some people who just won't love you even though you are capable of that art.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that there's a real problem, a disconnect in the humanity of the people who are. So obviously the problem is not with you, it's with the people receiving it.
Right.
Yeah.
If they
That's
can
the bridge.
receive that art and see the beauty in it and not see the beauty in you because of it, there's a real disconnect in them.
Yeah. And that goes back to education, right? Education of everybody, of what we've gone through, how far we've come, and yeah, and an understanding of it, and love, Quisha, and love.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like,
And I'm not going to change who I am.
No.
You know, I can make a choice of being rude and putting people in their place, but that's not me.
Yeah.
I'm all about love and respect. I even taught my son. I said to him, listen, you want to do anything to piss me off, disrespect me or anybody.
Yeah.
And you and I are going to have words, right? So, because I said, you're not just representing who you are, but you're representing our family and our ancestors and our, your grandparents, everybody, when you step out into the world and you're speaking to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I know this is I'll say a little thing what I tell my staff. I don't have kids, but my staff, they're like kids,
For your kids, yes.
So,
Your family.
When I run a hotel, my staff are privileged to get employee rates to stay at other hotels where they travel nationwide.
Nice.
And exactly what you say to your son is what my staff know. When you stay at another hotel, you're a guest at that hotel. You are representing your hotel where you work.
Mm-hmm.
Again, very same to what you said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do not F it up.
That's right.
You will lose all privileges of staying at any hotel at an employee rate. And you you pay the full price of the room. Then you know how it feels.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's the same thing, exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Good,
you guys,
Laveen.
thank you so much. That all the incredible points. I won't keep you any longer because it's already 2:30, and I didn't expect to. But we had a lot to talk about.
This is great. I thought we were going to have like a virtual lunch or something.
We can have drinks and
virtual drinks, whatever.
Drinks and lunch if you want. I mean, who cares? We got all day.
Yeah, right.
Hotels are empty.
Yes.
But thank you so much, you guys. And I think the last point that Quisha made is really important. The love and understanding and knowledge. That to me is, I actually feel so good now. I was so stressed before all of this, and I feel kind of at peace just in talking to you guys and bringing light to all these situations. And thank you so much for everything you brought today.
Could I say one more thing?
Yes, please, Quisha.
Because I know that a lot of my non-Black friends have been asking, what can we do? So the one thing I wanted to say is be an ear.
Yeah.
Just listen.
Right.
Don't have to solve the problem because we cannot do it all on our own, but just be an ear.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So on that note, thank you so much, you guys. And
It's a pleasure meeting both.
Yes.
The pleasure is mine too.
Pleasure.
yeah,
Thank you guys.
Thank you for this.
you're welcome. I literally threw it out there and it happened. So it's the
Yeah.
way it should be. Bringing it together. So thank you guys. Have a great afternoon or evening wherever you are. And we'll talk to you soon. Please.
Thank you, Duff.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. I don't know how to get everyone out of here. Let's go
Bye
drink
now.
and have lunch
Bye.
now.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. What an amazing conversation. As I said, I was pretty scared today to dive into this. It's such a huge subject, and there's political correctness and all of these things that, as a white person, I sometimes I don't know what to say, but I think what Quisha said, which is really important, sometimes we need to just be an ear. And I actually found myself doing that during this whole episode, is that I would just sit back and listen to what people had to say, because that's really important for all of us. I do want to say, though, that it is important for us to speak out too, as white people. And I have this awesome reading list that I think is really important if you want to go there and educate yourself and find out just what you can do, and just historically where things are at. This down here, the American Repertory Theater, has a really wonderful list of books for us to read and for everyone to educate themselves. So this show is happening Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. I hope that you will share this with all your friends. It's really important. We discussed some really important issues. We didn't solve anything, but that's up to you and your children and your families and your locals and your MPs and your government officials and the police and everyone. We need to bring it all together and love each other, look at each other in the eye, and respect each other. That was a really important word, which is the basis of any relationship: respect. RESPECT. Oh my God, I'm blanking on Aretha's name. Aretha Franklin said. Anyway, folks, have a wonderful Thursday. Thank you for taking the time to watch the show. Thank you to my guests, to Quisha Wint, to Laveen, Hira, and Adrian Churchill, coming to us from different parts of North America. I'm not sure what we'll do for next week. I think I might take the week off. I'm not sure, but we'll see. I wanted to interview my friend in Los Angeles, who is out there protesting, who went from just sitting in her living room to leading thousands of people on the streets of LA. And I'm intrigued to find out and talk to her more about that. But we'll see. Just keep an eye out for future broadcasts. I also want to say that it's Pride Month. And if you are feeling like that's wrong. Feeling like you need someone to talk to, or a place to go to reach out to someone and talk about stress, anxiety, mental health. Dr. Tim Guimond gave me this wonderful resource here, ementalhealth.ca. It's an umbrella of different resources where you can go and reach out and talk to people in Canada. Of course, everywhere in the States or in your country, there are resources like this that you can go and Google and find out. And don't be afraid to talk to someone if you're feeling like you need to. Thanks, everybody. We are now at 2:39, so we've talked on for quite a while. Thanks again for tuning in. Be good to yourselves and be good to each other, and love.